That's how our minds woke up and entered the realm of consciousness through mimicked reactions. So that set our minds into a conditioned state of following. We followed what our parents did. We followed what our older siblings did. We followed what the world around us did. Now, our minds are unlimited, but unfortunately, as we grew up, we didn't really leave behind the following mode. It's still with us, and we can see it and we can prove it. And this is our great imprisonment. And Neothink frees us. It liberates our minds from the great scourge of mankind, the following mode.
I'm Wallace Hamilton with Mark Hamilton, my father, the author of the Neothink books. And we're recording our first podcast today. And so I'll begin just by asking, can you tell me about Neothink? What is it?
Sure. Well, Neothink is unlike anything that's out there. Yes, Neothink is self-improvement, helps you make more money, helps you be more successful, helps you be happier in life, all of that. But what makes us different is that all of that comes from one common denominator that I've discovered and put together over the years, and that is I found the weak link in mankind, the scourge of mankind, the downfall, why we are in prison and we don't even know it. Our capacity of our mind is so fantastically great, but most of us never really tap that, and there's a reason for that. I'm going to go back to your childhood, to your infancy, and show you how this all happened and what has led to a great imprisonment of the human mind. When we were babies, before we even became conscious or had an idea or could make decisions or be honest or dishonest or lazy or put forth effort, we learned through mimicked reactions. That's how our minds woke up and entered the realm of consciousness through mimicked reactions. When we were little babies, we would mimic our parents, we would mimic our brothers and sisters, we would mimic the people in the world around us. So that set our minds into a conditioned state of following. We followed what our parents did, we followed what our older siblings did, we followed what the world around us did. Now, our minds are unlimited. But unfortunately, as we grew up, from our infancy into toddler, into children, into teenagers, into adulthood, we didn't really move on. We didn't really leave behind the following mode. It's still with us, and we can see it and we can prove it. And I have proven this, and this is our great imprisonment. And Neothink frees us. It liberates our minds from the great scourge of mankind, the following mode. So when you read my books, my Neothink books, you get the tools to put behind you, to move beyond, to unleash your human potential, which is not being done. It's not being done through the majority of the population. You'll have your exceptions out there, your Elon Musks, your Steve Jobs, but most of us are trapped in the following mode. If you'd like, we can walk through some examples to demonstrate to your listeners, to prove to them that yes, indeed, they are stuck in the following mode and they don't even know it.
So can you tell me more? Yeah, give me some examples of the following mode. I'm curious about actually what that looks like and really what that means.
I'd love to. Let's revisit COVID, that terrible time with all the draconian measures put on society, and we just accepted it, right? We listened to what our external authorities, our governors told us. We listened to the CDC. We listened to Google searches. We never thought that, hey, maybe Google has a political agenda of some sort, and maybe the reality is buried, and maybe we're just reading a narrative. We never even questioned that, right? Most of us, now we do. Now with some hindsight and some people who have broken through. But back then, ask yourself and be honest with yourself. Did you take a step back from the external authorities, from the narrative all around you? Did you ever take a step back and take a healthy skeptical look at things and start using your own mind and integrating logic to come up with some of your own decisions, your own thoughts? Or did you just let the external authorities tell you? Oh, let's go all over the place. Let's say in school, did you ever question the teachers and what they're teaching your children? Or what about in college? Did you ever question your professors, or did you just accept the narrative as your external authority? It goes on and on. Did you ever question your parents growing up? These are healthy things to do. That is teaching and training your mind to break out and begin using what I call integrated thinking, or higher level thinking, where you can rise up and look down and pull together pieces for yourself instead of just being down there in your slot in the community and just listening to what the external authorities tell you. So ask yourself, what are some other examples? I'm going to ask you, Wallace, what are some other examples of external authorities in your life?
Well, I mean, you kind of described a lot of it. I guess,
What about Big Pharma? What about the COVID vaccine? I mean, there were some healthy questioning of that, but most people just said, if you don't get that, you're an idiot, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, look what some of the problems we're finding today. What are some other examples? Big Pharma, big business. What are some other things? Your clergy, where are they coming from? Are you just listening to what they present you and just saying, well, they're the experts, they're the external authorities, I have faith in them, blind faith? This is the problem in humanity today, is letting the experts, I put that in quotes, letting the media tell you the way things are, and never having a healthy dose of skepticism to step back and use your own mind to put together logic. And it can be done, and it can be done quite easily when you read my books. I show you how to break free of the scourge of mankind, the mind disease of mankind, and to break free into the healthy life of an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs. I know that sounds quite out there, fantastical, but I am telling you that's available to everyone.
So how much does this following mode limit you? And I also want to ask, when you have this following mode that you're talking about, from when you're a baby and child and you go into school, your teachers in kindergarten, then society, your friends' parents, all the way out throughout your life. And I guess, how do you know what or who to trust? Because at a certain point, it begins with, your parents. You have to believe what they say, and at least up until a certain point. And I guess in the news and media as well, who is there to trust? And how do you actually get accurate information?
Right. Well, this is when you have to start using your own mind to put together pieces of logic. It's like putting together a puzzle. And you see certain puzzle pieces, we will say, of logic, and you start putting those together. Let's go back to the COVID example, and let's think about this for a moment. When your children, and we all know now that COVID did not really affect people seriously under, 50 years of age? But it didn't affect children at all. And when they started putting masks on children, you could just follow that, right, and be a follower, or you could resist that and say, now, wait a minute here. This is disturbing my child's development. I don't agree with this. Wow, all of a sudden you're going against the current, the crowd. That's another big external authority, the crowd. You're going against the current, and that's difficult. Ask yourself, whenever I go against the crowd, could even just be a group of friends, whenever I go against the crowd, do I want to? Nah, I really don't want to. That's a sure sign that you are affected, you are caught in the following mode. You're not able to break free of that and think for yourself. So we go back to the COVID example. Let's go to the waves of the COVID virus. You had your first wave, which was bad. Then you had your second wave of a variant, the Delta variant, I believe it was called, and that was still quite bad. Then you had another wave, and then finally you got the Omicron. And if you just start putting together some logic, you could see very statistically in the numbers, you could see the drop-off in hospital visits, the drop-off in deaths, the drop-off in severity, and you knew by the time the Omicron variant came around that it was really pretty harmless, almost to the point to where you say, maybe I actually want that, because it builds up antibodies and immunities to the COVID virus. But you had the government still pushing the booster shots and wearing masks and social distancing and all of that stuff, and kids not going back to school, teachers not coming in. You had all of that mystical nonsense going on, and anyone who would start using their own mind, which a lot of people at that point did, thank goodness, you start seeing the irrationality of the experts out there. You start figuring things out on your own. And that's part of life. It's not just trusting everyone or trusting your experts. That's the prison the following mode keeps us in. We need to break free of that and start using integrated thinking ourselves to put together the puzzle pieces and the logic to build our own puzzle pictures and to know what is no reality.
So it's not about trusting everybody, the following mode. I understand that. But I guess from the opposite perspective, of those projecting those things, like I guess back to COVID, those experts and those authorities, do they know that they're potentially misleading people, or what's going on there?
Oh, well, there you're dealing with honesty versus dishonesty. There's a lot of dishonesty out there. There's some people who just mean well. I'd say at the beginning of COVID, people just meant well. They just saw this, they didn't know what it was, and they were just doing their best to deal with it. But I think as it went on, it became a power grab for our leaders, and I'll put that in quotes because they're not really our leaders. I call them the parasitical elite class, the ruling class. And they're up there to gain power, prestige, wealth, and unearned power, we'll call it. It's not earned power like a businessman who provides you with a value that you want that value, say your iPhone, and you pay for that. That's earned power. That's good power. That's power that benefits the people. But then you have the parasitical elite class that is just grabbing power. And that's done through a lot of dishonesty, a lot of illusions. It's a big maze of illusions out there that my NeoThink books cut through it all. And that sort of leads me to something else here. My NeoThink books and NeoThink work on two levels. Number one, the individual. The individual, you, me, our friends, our family, the population, are stuck in that imprisonment, the mind disease, the following mode. My NeoThink tools in my books help individuals break free of that to rise up with greater prosperity, wealth, success, happiness, love. That happens on an individual level and is very good at that. To help individuals, I have worked for 45 years since my first book, which was published in 1979, 45 years ago. I have worked in a private NeoThink club, and the only way you could get my NeoThink books was through an invite. I searched the world for whom I most wanted, I was most attracted to bring my literature to, were the searchers of the world, people who were searching for a better life. I scoured the world, 140 countries, 12 languages. I have sold my books in. I have found searchers around the world. I found them. I found millions of them, and they are in my private NeoThink club. But just this year, with the state of things today, I have learned that the following mode of going up to another level of civilization itself, not of the people I found, not of the searchers of the world who are in my NeoThink club, but the general population throughout the world, we're sinking. Look at the state of things today. The power grab has just gotten too great. And I've decided I must now come out of my private Neothink club and I must go public. I must do this in order to rise up and capture and help the entire civilizations around the world. My Neothink books deal with these two levels, with the individual, and I've helped millions, and with civilizations as a whole. And this is the next move, and it requires me to go public in order to reach the masses. That's what we're doing now. Now, at this other level, let's talk about this for a moment. Civilizations, not individuals, but civilizations. What do you think happens, Wallace, to a civilization where the people are all in the mind disease, all captured in the scourge of mankind? They all have the following mode in their mind, controlling their mind. What do you think happens in a civilization of followers? What do you think happens?
They can easily be manipulated and just told what to do, suppressed, not allowed to live a better life. I guess if people would rise up out of that following mode and be independent, then that would take away power from the elite class that you talk about.
Very good. And that's exactly what's happened. Civilizations have ruling classes. It's an opposite and equal reaction to the following mode of civilization. The ruling class obliges. They say, fine, hey, we'll be your leader. But these are people who took the dishonest, lazy route up to this easy grab, this easy power grab. Money, power, wealth, prestige. It's all an illusion. There are other people who have risen up through the honest effort path, the Henry Fords, the Thomas Edisons, the Elon Musks, the Steve Jobs, who have brought us values, every value we have, our iPhones, our cars, our homes, our hospitals. These are all because of the legitimate leaders who earned their power. Then there are those who took the easy, lazy route, but we afforded it to them. We said, we need leaders. This goes back thousands of years. We need leaders. We need to be led. We need to be supervised. So what happens? Well, they oblige. These are the educated elite. Yeah, they're very smart people who found the lazy, easy way to take control of the general population of civilizations. I deal with this in my books as well. Now, the only way to fix that problem is to go public and no longer be my private Neothink club. I could fix individuals' problems in my private Neothink club, but to fix the problem of the masses of civilizations, I must come out and get this information to the world. So that's my next move, Wallace, is to go public, which is what I'm doing now, and there's a process in place that I want to send a wave across the world that basically wakes people up from the following mode and gives them the tools to eliminate the ruling class that's been suppressing them all their lives. If you'd like, I can talk to you more about the tool to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a tall order. So how do you actually plan to do that?
Right, that is a tall order. And Neothink, myself with Neothink, think at deeper levels, down at fundamental levels that people don't see out there. There's an effort to go deep, down to the fundamental underneath. And I'm going to give that to you as to how to free civilization right here, right now. Our Constitution was the best thing that's ever happened from a political country standpoint. It's the best thing that ever happened. But our founding fathers did not get down to the very fundamental underneath. In fact, the Bill of Rights are fantastic. They're the beacon of freedom, especially the First Amendment, right? But that started something that now it's killing, it's choking our country. And what do you think that is? Think about it. The Bill of Rights. What is that?
Rights.
Correct. What's happening today? Our country is being destroyed under rights. Rights to this, rights to that, rights for these people, rights for those people, rights for this minority, rights for that minority, rights for this sexual orientation, rights for that, rights, DEI, ESG. Rights, rights, rights. I remember reading with a lump in my throat, this father whose daughter was stabbed and killed, worked in a furniture store in broad daylight because of someone who was afforded rights and therefore was free, who was a very scary character. And he killed his daughter, and the father said, rights, basically I'm paraphrasing, but he said, rights are destroying our country. And he's completely right on with that. They are destroying our country.
Well, if you don't have rights, then what do you have?
That's a great question there, Wallace. And what you have is this. We have what Neothink has provided the world. It's called the prime law. And that's what our founding fathers longed for, but missed, and they were oh so close. And when you understand the whole history of our country and the founding of our country, and after the war, the number of men that were lost, and the debt our country had, and the Articles of Confederation were not strong enough to hold the country together, the colonies together. There were monetary issues. The country was going to fall apart, and the Constitution was needed, but it wasn't enough to hold certain colonies in, and things were going to fall apart, so they had to rush through the Bill of Rights. Even Thomas Jefferson himself was saying things like, a half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. He's talking about, making metaphors.
And I also know that Benjamin Franklin, after they came out of the, and then established the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that he said, someone asked, the tale goes, what government have you given us? He said, a republic if you can keep it. I know a lot of the founding fathers did not have confidence that their structure of government would actually hold up for the long term.
And you'll be shocked when you see each of the constitutionalists, the original writers of the Constitution, James Madison and the others, they all felt, each and every one of them, that the Constitution was a temporary Constitution, that everything would change. And they all knew they missed something. They just didn't know what they missed. And this is what they missed, going down to the very fundamental. You didn't need a Bill of Rights. And they argued over that. They were afraid to put in the Bill of Rights, because once you start mentioning rights, there are things that aren't covered by those rights, and things begin to fall apart. What they missed was this. Going underneath it all, we don't need to add rights. We need to remove the negative. And the negative in any civilization, in any group, in any government, the negative is initiatory force. Now you can say you remove initiatory force, and everyone has every right that exists, because you are freeing the individual. The smallest of all minorities is the individual. It's not blacks, it's not browns, it's not red and yellow or white. It's the individual. Once you protect the individual, you've protected everyone. And you've protected everyone equally. So how do you protect? What's the fundamental law of protection? It's removing initiatory force.
What is initiatory force?
Initiatory force is the initiation or the threat of force. Fraud also falls into that. That's a passive form of initiatory force as well, because you're manipulating someone through misinformation, through fraud. So these are forms of initiatory force. Now, self-defense force is necessary and moral, but initiatory force must be removed. That's the negative, and then things can flourish. So there is a prime law. Again, go to neothink.com and subscribe to my newsletter, and you'll see all of this information. You'll learn the prime law. This is what we need is the 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and this will free society. It will eliminate the parasitical ruling class. And you may ask, well, ask me, Wallace, how can you do that? How can you not have a political system in place? Ask me.
Well, how do you not have a political system in place?
And what would we lose? What would we lose? Would we lose our military? What else? Courts, prisons, police. Right. What happens to all of that without a political system? Well, I'm here to tell you, Wallace, and this has never happened in the history of our world, that we do not need a political system. This is a new dimension, a new way of thinking, because every civilization has had a political system since the beginning of times. There is a new way, and it's removing the political system through the prime law. Because once you have the prime law and you no longer have initiatory force, government has no more initiatory force. They can't force you to do things. They can't enforce things from an initiation standpoint. They can from a self-defense. But when I say they, everything changes, because think about it. If you have no more initiatory force, how are they going to get their funds?
Well, taxes right now, you'll go to prison if you don't pay them. That's how they get their funds.
Threat of force. That's part of the prime law. Threat of force.
So then what happens? No one will pay their taxes?
There we go. So that's why there's never been this other dimension where there's no longer a political system. And why? Because there's no more followers asking for leaders. Everyone becomes a self-leader through my NeoThink books, but everyone can become a self-leader. We'll get into more like how prosperous that will be, how incredibly prosperous civilization, how there'll be no more poverty or diseases. This sounds incredulous, but it's all explained in my books. So what do we have? We no longer have a political system. Right. We leave the political world behind, and we move into a business world. Then we have a business system that runs the country.
So what does that look like?
I know every time I say that, everyone says businessmen are evil, they exploit us, they go back to the Industrial Revolution and talk about the business owners and how they took advantage of slave conditions for their employees and all this. Okay, we've never ever had pure capitalism, never. Because we've always had government, and they're creating laws and regulations that prevented just pure capitalism from actually happening. Okay, I know capitalism has this horrible connotation, but we've never really had, in fact, we have never had capitalism, pure capitalism, ever in the history of the world. Because we've never had a society of self-leaders. We've always had a society of followers who needed leaders, who needed supervisors up here, politicians and regulatory bureaucrats. We get rid of all that and everything changes. It's truly a new dimension. Instead of having incompetent politicians who are really in it for themselves and for re-election, instead of having them bringing so-called welfare to civilization, we will, for every need that exists, we will have thousands of Steve Jobs out there satisfying that need. That's what would happen in this other dimension. Everything will be taken care of. Military, that will be taken care of with private forces that would supersede anything the government could do. The court system. And the reason it would work is because, and this is where even the objectivists haven't gone all the way to the new dimension. Because even Ayn Rand believed that you still need a government to control objective laws. Well, I say, no, you don't need that. Because reputation will drive everything in that Your dollars are what's going to do the voting, or your so-called dollars, whatever the currency is going to do the voting, not you getting fooled and propagandized into thinking this politician or that politician. Instead, society is going to gravitate to the best values at the best costs. And their dollars are going to put in place the military, are going to put in place the courts, and you vary one time from the prime law, you're out of business, because everyone will know the prime law is what made them so wealthy, so prosperous, so disease-free, so no more poverty, it'll all be gone. I can give you just little clues. This is much too much for your audience to get all at once. It really is. You have to, I have 14 gigantic Neothink books that get into all of this and explain how this all works, that dot the I's, cross the T's, all the logics, build the Legos, it's all there. But let me just give you an example. When the PCs first came out, just before they came out to today, that computer revolution period, you have in your pocket something that costs tens of millions of dollars just a couple generations ago, or a generation ago, I should say. Within 2 years, it's going to be, with AI, it's just going to go through the roof. This is actually business working without being so impeded by regulations and force, initiatory force, and laws that make no sense. Regulations that stop us from getting our energy, stop us from producing, stop medicines from the research and development from really growing at the rapid pace that it should be growing. I can't even begin sitting here with you, Wallace, in this podcast to get into it all, because it's just so massive. It's an entire new dimension. I would suggest that your listeners who care about this, who really want to know more, to go ahead to neothink.com, subscribe to my free newsletter, and start learning about this, understanding that there is another dimension the world has never seen that we can bring to civilization, and this is the very reason I'm going public.
So I'm intrigued what you mean by no taxes, and how does that work?
Yeah, most people, that's the first thing they say, well, how do you have no taxes and have all this going? And there's to me it's a very easy answer, but let me just get into it a little bit. All right, so in this new society, we'll call it, in this new world, first time on planet Earth that we would have no political system, we would have it'd be a business world, not a political world. All the politicization is gone. We have a business world, but it's not the type of business so many people think, where it's kind of like the bad businesses today are all intertwined with government. I call them political businessmen. It's a revolving door. Congress, big tech, Congress, lobbyists. It's not that. There's none of that, because there's no more politics. There's no more politicization. It's a new dimension. All right, so when you're in this new dimension, what you're going to find is that prosperity is going to explode. Now, I know that sounds like a utopia, but this is actually going to happen. The demonstration I gave you a minute ago about a little microcosm, the personal computer revolution, and what came with that was the information revolution and so on, and how in just a few years people could put in their pocket something that before only the rich people could afford, the computing power from one phase to the next phase, because the computer revolution moved so fast that government regulators didn't really know how to get a grip on it yet, so it just went. And that's what businesses do when you don't have government regulators trying to make a name for themselves and build their portfolio so they can get boosted up to the next level in government. So that's what happens. And I went back over 100 years to the Henry Ford example, and the standard of living just soared in America thanks to Henry Ford and roads and cars, transportation. So when you have these little moments throughout history that move too fast for government to get their hooks on, Ford and Edison and Firestone, thank you. They were looked at as heroes among society until we got, was it Franklin Roosevelt? Started coming in with this evil government control and started destroying these companies. So when these companies were free of the government iron chain and ball around their legs, they just went like this, and everything they did was for you, the consumer, right? They were very competitive with each other, but the benefactor were the people. They were the ones who got the greatest values for the cheapest prices, sort of like what happened, a more recent example with computing power, smartphones, and so on. And what's starting to happen now in the medical world, largely thanks to AI, things are really beginning to roll. Without the iron ball and chain around businesses' legs, and with politicization out of the picture, you'll no longer have these big businesses that are married to government, and they together they create things that block out competition. They create regulations that the big businesses are happy to have because it blocks out competitors from rising up and taking away their business. So you get the politicization out, you get politics the hell out of business and business the hell out of politics, and you no longer have politics, period. It's a new dimension. Things will move like I just described, like the cars and what happened to the standard of living then. By the way, when Henry Ford perfected the assembly line, the production line moved through all different industries, and the standard of living shot up in America thanks to that, thanks to Henry Ford. So prosperity will soar, poverty will go away because the standard of living will just begin to rise. That's what will happen. You learn more about this when you read my free newsletter. Go to neothink.com and subscribe to Mark Hamilton's free newsletter. Now, you wanted to ask me about taxes. Okay, let's stop and think for a minute. People who were struggling before, people who were in poverty before, suddenly are lifted by this standard of living. In fact, I call it the millionaire phenomenon. You'll see in my books that everyone will live like a millionaire. Everyone. And it happens through getting rid of the ruling class, politics, politicization is gone. It's exorcised from civilization. And the prosperity that people will have, they will, at that point, recognize what brought them that prosperity. And let's just say through the business dynamics, you establish a company called government. Well, just for the sake of it, we'll just call it government. Okay? It's not really the government we know today, because every government that has ever existed has existed with initiatory force. But this government would be basically business. But let's just call it government to make it easy. And this government would be full of people who, through their reputation, are very good at figuring out things that society needs. Infrastructure, military, courts, so on and so forth, police, and so on and so forth. So you would want to voluntarily pay for that because you know how wealthy you are because of that, because of this business system, this business society. So I'm just going to say, you might likely just tithe 10% to live in this wonderful society. I call it the beautiful society. People from all over the world would want to come here. Well, we would probably allow that as long as they would tithe 10% of their earned income to government. It's a business system. And when people are okay with making the adjustment in their minds, calling it something else, then we'll call it something else. But everything's competitive. If that government entity is not providing the best services, then a competitor will rise up and people can start shifting their money over there. Everyone would just say it will be like a covenant. That's to live in a beautiful society, 10% of your earned income, and that will be voluntarily given. Now, if you have deadbeats, how would you deal with those? First of all, I'm going to tell you, deadbeats would be theoretical because no one would want to be a deadbeat, and here's why. if you're a deadbeat and not contributing your 10%, you're going to be called out as such by a private business who calls out deadbeats, and people just won't do business with you. You're ostracized, and it'll be very difficult to live in such a society. Well, you wouldn't want to do that. And why would you do that? It's just theoretical, because you're living so well in such a society. Let's talk about crime for a minute. The prime law, it's all focused on eliminating initiatory force. So the punishment would be so quick and so harsh and so dramatic for crime, no one would want to do it. But it even goes beyond that. So you have to shed your political mind, your following mode mind. You have to shed that to be able to grasp what I'm actually saying. And you learn it all in my Neothink books. In such a society, well, let's just back up. Why do criminals commit crime in this political society? Well, it's the easy way to get money. It's the easy way. But in the business society, that is the hard way, because of the punishment and the prime law coming down on any initiatory force and what that would mean in your life. You'd be ostracized. That's the hard way of getting money. The easy way, there's going to be so many people, because society and standard of living is going to be so high, that people today who are in poverty are going to live like millionaires. Yeah, sounds like a utopia, but it's not. It's a new dimension. So there will be no forced tax collection. There'll be a tithe, a voluntary tithe. You'll theoretically have deadbeats, but in reality, in practicality, there won't be deadbeats. And now you wanted to ask me about disease.
Well, so what happens if you don't pay?
You get ostracized. And then it becomes almost impossible to live. Who wants to support a deadbeat? I would not. Everything's business run. If every business says, you can't do business here, what does that deadbeat do? Does he go live off the land and hunt rabbits? And then so be it. He can go do that. But he can't live in society successfully.
So then what would he have to do?
Perish.
Or get a job? And
no one would hire him. They don't want to hire a deadbeat. If you're not contributing back voluntarily, then we don't need to do business with you. Deadbeats will be in theory. There won't be deadbeats, because everyone will be doing so well in such a society.
Right, but if they want to make a switch, and well, if you don't have a job, you can't pay taxes. So but if they get a job, I mean, are they still ostracized?
No one would hire you if you're a deadbeat. That would be very well known. It just wouldn't. There's no room for deadbeats.
Once you become a deadbeat, do you just stay a deadbeat and you can't get better?
Okay, so if you then, I'm sure if you go to a business and say, I'm changing my ways, people in this world are going to be very good, loving, warm people. There'll be no criminals. There'll be a loving feeling for your fellow man, and you will give second chances as long as you don't pass at the point of no return. And I'm sure you can tell me what the point of no return is.
Murder.
If you ever take someone else's life, that's the point of no return. But there's a lot of forgiveness and compassion if someone wants to change their life and be a contributor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if it's a business structure and you tithe 10% and that essentially runs the government, then at that point, is that whoever has the most money, or is it majority rule?
First of all, money is not going to be, that could be a lot of questions. But if you take the wealthiest people today, let's say the 10 wealthiest people today, and pool their money and resources, it would just be such a fraction of the 1 annual gross domestic product, that it wouldn't have any control or influence. And that's without me getting into the deeper psychological explanations as to why that would not become a problem. As far as that goes, everyone is going to be contributing to society. In fact, at a certain point, you won't even have money anymore, but that's another whole discussion for another time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but what about majority rule?
There's no majority rule. There's no rule. Remember, we're not followers anymore. We're self-leaders. Nobody rules anybody. Everyone lives and let lives. Everyone can do anything that person wants to do, as long as it doesn't harm someone else. So there's no rule. There's no majority rule.
Okay, so you talked about diseases. How would those be cured?
Oh, well, technology, everything would advance because it's a business society now. Everything would advance at many times the speed that they advance in a political society. Political society, which is all we've ever had, everything's held back by regulatory bureaucrats just mucking up everything, stopping us from getting energy, stopping technology, stopping the medical world. You have things like the FDA in there just causing great burdens. You have the EPA causing great burdens. You just go down through the list of regulatory bureaucracies, just holding everything back. You have these presidents and congressmen and senators all just trying to get reelected and trying to play to their base. And everything gets mucked up. You get rid of all of that, and you're in a free business society. Oh, so people will say, well, then, you won't have proper regulations on things. Yes, you will. Much more effective and much more benevolent regulations, because all the regulatory companies would be private and they're competing for your business. So your dollars are going to do the voting. You aren't stuck with the FDA or the EPA. You are instead letting your dollars do the voting, and your dollars may say, well, I'll just trust this company government because they've really demonstrated I have faith in them now. And we will, once we're in that society, we'll change the name from government to something else, but just to make it easier for everybody mentally right now. But you're in a business system, a business society, not in a political society. So everything just moves at rapid speeds, but in careful, safe speeds. Now, I'm just going to give you an example of my father, who was a scientist at DuPont, and he was involved in many different areas of DuPont. One area was he was working with a team who had developed, what are we talking about here, 50 years ago, a very promising cure to cancer. It was a very fine textile that was injected into the bloodstream, and it found its way to cancer tumors, and it was impregnated with cancer killing drugs, and it would encase the tumor, and basically at that point the tumor becomes harmless. But cost prohibitive FDA regulations killed that project. That's one example. So we get rid of the political world, things like I just described to you, and you get into this free world where, yes, there'll be regulations, but they'll be honest, benevolent companies where your dollars do the voting to get the best ones in there. And everything can move so fast, including cures to fatal diseases. Within 10 years, this is my prediction, in a business society with the technology we have today, with AI and all that, I believe that within 10 years we will have cured aging itself. And I explain how in my books, and the best way to get to my books would be to get my free newsletter. Go to neothink.com and subscribe to Mark Hamilton's free newsletter.
So what's your end goal?
Well, I guess you can say I just said my end goal. That's secure aging and death.
Why?
Because the human consciousness, your consciousness to you, is the most important thing in the universe. Their consciousness to them are the most important thing in the universe. So that is my end goal, to save, to not let the most important value in the universe perish. And how do you get there? Through a business society, by purging the political society. And how do we do that? It all comes back to us, to you, to me. And that is breaking free, eliminating the following mode, which was never meant for conscious man. It was meant for bicameral man 3,000 years ago. It's not meant for conscious man today. It's the greatest limiter of the human mind. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the human mind is the most wasted mind in the animal kingdom. Why? Because it's held back. It's never reaching its full potential. How do we reach that? It comes back to the NeoThink tools to free your mind from the mind disease, the following mode.
So if somebody wants to break out of the following mode and achieve what you've been talking about, how would they go about doing that?
Just started something brand new. Now that I've broken out of the private NeoThink Club into the public mode, and I'm doing this for the people out there. First time ever, I put up a masterclass that's going to break individuals out of the following mode, unleashing their human potential, and it will just blow their minds what they can do with their lives. So yeah, go to neothink.com and you can find my brand new masterclass to free you from the following mode.
So what about wars and unstoppable global conflicts?
Well, that's a great question, Wallace, and there's a very simple answer to that, actually. If the prime law became the 28th Amendment to our U.S. Constitution, which removes all initiatory force and starts shifting us from a political society to the fast-moving, healthy business society, wealthy, healthy, prosperous, America would so quickly become so powerful and strong. China, Russia, North Korea, no foreign country would deal with us, would touch us. That's number one. Number two, the rest of the world would see how fast, and by the way, this is why the whole political world is so afraid of this. The rest of the world would see how fast our people rose to great prosperity and great standards of living, and they will want it too. It will cause like a domino effect across the world in other countries. It would be an unstoppable movement, the NeoThink movement. And it would essentially bring us not only wealth, not only health, but peace.
It all sounds amazing. Is it actually achievable?
It sounds too good to be true. It sounds like I'm speaking in some utopian dream here. But look, I've spent 45 years researching, studying, developing this. I have millions of very happy customers. Right now I have 100,000 testimonials. Sold this in 140 countries in 12 different languages. This is for real, my friend. This is for real. And it's time for me to stop presenting it in my private NeoThink Club and instead to present it to the entire world.
All right, well, thank you so much. That concludes our first podcast.
It was really a pleasure, and your listeners are going to be a little shocked, or they might say, this guy is just too much. But like I said, I have thousands of pages of books. It's all there, and it's like a mathematical proof. It's all real.
All right. Well, looking forward to hearing more, and I'll see you next week.
Okay, well, thanks, son. I really enjoyed it.
All right.